Hello folks, and welcome to my video. Well, today on this video I'll be talking about the state of Minnesota, and in particular the fact that state of Minnesota, which is the state that I'm hailing from, has been lately, very recently, on the national news and under the close scrutiny of the federal government. And this is the topic that I will talk about. And parts of it is, it's going to sound like political, but I try to make it as little political as possible, because my intent is not to bring those typical political discussions and arguments between the right and left, between the liberals and conservatives. This is not the intent of this video, but this is basically, this is going to be covering and focusing on 100% on the facts, on what happened and why the state of Minnesota is on the national news. What was the reason, and why is it financially under the very close scrutiny of the federal government, and it will remain so probably for years to come. The reason is a huge scam. So let's start talking about this. Basically, the Minnesota, especially the Minneapolis area. When I'm saying Minnesota, actually hear me, Minneapolis. The city of Minneapolis, which is the largest, the major city of the state of Minnesota, has a big, huge community, Somali community. Somali community has been here for, I think, more than a decade now, and their numbers are estimated close to anywhere between 90 to 100,000, maybe 100,000 plus now in Minneapolis. And their status is refugee status. They were brought from Somalia after the war in Mogadishu, and the U.S. operations in Somalia, and then because of the failed state status of Somalia, there was no safety, and then United States government basically provided the Somali people escaping from Somalia for their livelihood. They placed them in the state of Minnesota under the refugee status. And what recently happened is Trump administration has officially removed and lifted the TPS status of Somali people in Minneapolis. TPS is standing for temporary protected or temporary protection status. TPS status was given and has been given to any Somali person who came from Somalia under the refugee status. So why do you think I can hear people, okay, Trump did this and other typical Trump did? No, it is it would be extremely wrong and misleading just to leave it at that, to say Trump administration removed the TSP status of Somali people. The reason behind that is complicated and equally clean also. It's a very clear-cut situation. It's a huge scam. Let's start talking about the scam dynamics. What happened and what led to Trump himself to remove the Somalis' TSP status. I'm sorry, TPS status. Minnesota, as a state, it is well known as a very generous state, especially when it comes to medical care, assistance, financial assistance, all kinds of assistance programs, such as gas assistance, rent assistance, for those who are in difficulty, all kinds of assistance, financial assistance programs. Medical assistance or medical programs are also huge. In fact, I always said that the state of Minnesota, I can comfortably claim this, that the best and number one state in the United States when it comes to healthcare has the highest healthcare, highest quality of healthcare in the state of Minnesota. And there are lots of federally sanctioned programs and state sanctioned programs, I'm sorry, and state funded programs through taxpayers, obviously, and there's basically to help a lot of people who are in destitute need from the medical help perspective. What happened was, the last several years, unfortunately, there has been several very large scale and complex schemes and scam programs that was conducted by, unfortunately, those people who are none other than Somali origin. I don't want to make it sound like every single person who belongs to Somali community took part in that, therefore every single one of them is criminal. That's exactly not what I'm saying. So I want to make sure that we have a clear understanding before I continue. But nevertheless, the dimensions, the degree, the magnitude of the scam was at the level which I will describe. I will give more details. At the level that could not be any more hidden or ignored. It surfaced. It basically, once it surfaced, once they weren't anymore able to hide it, it just exploded. The degree of the magnitude of the scam and fraudulent financial activities. And once it exploded, once it basically everything came out, people were in shock in terms of the amount of dollars that was literally stolen from the taxpayers, that was supposed to be going to people who are in need in the state of Minnesota. Those are the seniors, elderly, children with various different types of medical attention, food programs, poverty-related programs, all those people who are today in need, they are unfortunately deprived of their resources that they have a right to because they are Minnesota residents and American citizens. Why? Because those funds have been stolen. So let's talk about what happened. There are, first off, three major operations that I'm going to talk about. One of them is called Feed My Starving Children. So, excuse me, just, pay attention to something here real quick. Okay. Alright. So, one of them is called, the program's name is Feed My Starving Children. There's been recently investigation have been completed. It was a very large scale investigation, and it took a long time to complete. Eventually they completed, and a lot of indictments, a lot of arrests have been completed, and they indicted 56 individuals. Every single one of them is Somali origin. Basically what they did was, you can tell from the name, they Feed My Starving Children. They came up with this program. They figured out all kinds of loopholes. They managed to build a very complicated schema that authorities, especially at lower levels of fraudulent activities, they were not basically being able to detect, or they just, I don't know, it wasn't caught by the auditing systems. So they kept doing this, and knowing that, well, they can do this and they can siphon a ton of money, millions of dollars, and they can increase. Why not stealing more? And the level of theft was up to eventually $300 million. So $300 million were siphoned by these fancy financial schemes. They stole, again, the taxpayers' dollars who were supposed to be financing those people in need in Minnesota. That was that operation. What they found out after the fact, that after they started actually auditing and very closely, that was a criminal investigation, obviously, financial criminal investigation. Once they researched and they found that, they claimed there was receipts for thousands of children who they were feeding. Actually, in reality, there was not a single child. Or there was lots of different recipients of various different kinds of assistance programs related to food, again, feeding, the starving children. None of them were there. There was receipts indicating that ton of meals were delivered. In actuality, there was no such thing. So the schemes like that, eventually they figured out that, okay, it was a huge scheme, huge fraudulent, financial fraudulent activities, and then they completed that. 56 people were identified, indicted, arrested, and jailed. That's one. They feed my starving children. The other one is called, in short, abbreviation is, I think, HSS. HSS is standing for Housing Stabilization Services. Housing Stabilization Services. So they came out as another humanitarian program, filled with compassion, trying to help homeless people. To put homeless people, to rescue them out of the streets and put them in some kind of decent housing environment. So they came up with this program, and they did the similar things, and they basically exploited the maybe potential loopholes in the system, maybe lack of auditing, or whatever you call it, and eventually they stole comparable amount of money. It was within the neighborhood of $250+ million. Again, same thing. It was the programs. These programs are all 100% funded by the taxpayers. So taxpayers' money was stolen. Again, once they audited, after the fact, as a criminal investigation, they found out, and that's recent. The other one was not as recent, but not as late. I mean, it's within the end of 2024. I would say maybe toward the middle of 2025. But what I'm talking about, this HSS, the housing project, so-called housing project, has been finalized. Investigation of it has been finalized very recently, like I think as recent as last week. And then, same thing, lots of Somalis, and every single one of them was indicted. And one more, another program yet, and it is for another kind of a humanitarian sounding assistance program. The name, I cannot recall its official name they used, but it was for the children with autism. So the program that they came up with, the operation that they built, the fraudulent operation that they built, was to help children with autism. Just looking at the numbers, it's amazing. If you compare the amount of dollars that they spend based on this program, and compare this with, let's say, 5-6 years ago, about, I think it was the beginning of 2020, this program was in existence, the autism support, supporting the children with autism. It's not like a new thing, but they hijacked it, and they basically totally exploited that. In 2020, the fund was spending on the average $1 million annually. One or 2 million, less than $2 million annually. That was the total utilization. That shows the total utilization of the program by the Minnesota residents. On the other hand, come to 2025, and that's, I think, June of 2025, the dollars that this program was funding was up to and exceeding $400 million in less than 5 years. There was a huge explosion in the state of Minnesota in terms of children with autism. All of a sudden, all the kids became autistic, in other words. Well, they also completed investigation on this program. The same type of deal. They find out officially, this is on now the investigation in court records, that this was completely 100% fraudulent, and it was a scam, huge scam, and again by entirely the team of Somali individuals. After all these back to back, all these news came out of Minnesota, Trump administration eventually got involved because it went up to federal, obviously federal levels, and it went up to Trump. And then he said, Trump said, this has got to stop now. And he put a stop on it. What he did was removing the, I just mentioned at the beginning of this recording, removing the TPS, the temporary protection status of the Somali people. Now, again, some people I know, I can hear that, they can say this, okay, all these fraudulent activities have been committed by Somali people without an exception. But does that mean that every single Somali is connected and tied to these fraudulent activities, and every single one of them actually got benefits, got monies out of that? That's not what it is, obviously. But again, going back to the same thing, the magnitude and level is so big and so large, something radical and drastic has to be done, and this is what has been done. The story is not ending here. The story is actually starting at this point. So if you add just add up those numbers, 300 million, 250 plus million, 400 plus million, we're talking about close to $1 billion. We're talking about, easily close to $1 billion, right? Within the last 5+ years, 5 to 10 years, maybe 5+ years, what they found out is not only that U.S. taxpayers, in this case Minnesota taxpayers, have been financing these fraudulent activities for Somali people in Minnesota. What is even worse and horrible is this: Minnesota taxpayers has been financing, 100% financing of the terrorist organizations in Somalia, namely Al-Shabab terrorist organization, which is an affiliate of Al-Quaida. Al-Shabab in Somalia is an affiliate and has strong ties, strong links to Al-Qaeda. And this organization, get this number, has been financed to the tune of 1.7 trillion, 1.7 billion, I correct myself, $1.7 billion. All of that financed 100% by Minnesota taxpayers, like folks like me, or anyone who is a Minnesota resident, U.S. citizen, working, making a living in the state of Minnesota, and paying taxes, state taxes, to the state of Minnesota. Those are the dollars that have been siphoned, stolen from us to support the terrorist activities in Somalia, directly to the organization called Al-Shabab. Now, just let's just pause here now. Okay, I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to bring a different dimension now. So far, I explained three major fraudulent scam activities that has been going on and being committed and done completely by Somali people. And then the next phase of it is how they've been basically funneling the money out of the U.S. system into Somalia through, again, very complicated and fancy international financial schemes. Eventually, the money was being ended up in the hands of the Al-Shabab to plan, organize, coordinate, and deploy terrorist activities. Guess against who do you think that would be? Maybe 9/11 like of activities. And it was all financed by Minnesota taxpayers. That is the extra point of discussion. And that's why Trump basically said, this has got to stop here. That's enough. And removed immediately. That's effective immediately for every single Somali person living in Minneapolis or surrounding communities. It's an unfortunate thing, I know. There are many Somali people. We have in our community also some Somali families. They've been living here. Some of them have been, next generation being born and raised here. That's different. If their kids are born and raised here, they're American citizens, they're not subject to that. But those who came from under the refugee status are definitely, every single one of them, subject to the removal of the TPS status. And I know civil rights organizations, civil unions, ACLU type of unions will make a whole lot of noise about that. Like it's inhumane, it's undemocratic, this is fascistic, this is Nazism and all that. Well, okay. How about when they're making all these noises, and I believe they will, what do they say when it comes to people in Minnesota who are in absolute and definite need of those funds for their livelihood? The senior citizens, people whose livelihood and whose food items depend on these programs, people whose their children's health care and health monitoring situation plans are depending on these programs, on these funds, doctor visits, all these they cannot do now because the funds that are supposed to be available to satisfy those needs are not in place anymore because they have been stolen by Somali, I'm going to say, pirates. Well, this is a different kind of piracy. Another aspect that addition to this story. Ilhan Omar, U.S. Congresswoman representing the state of Minnesota. She is of Somali origin. She came from Somalia. She became naturalized American citizen. And she's been subject to a lot of heavy criticism. I will mention here because it is related. Couple things. Ms. Omar, as a congresswoman, in her official capacity from the Congress, from her official post, this is what she said. I am here, and this was delivered in this speech. She was delivering this speech not in English language, in Somali language, officially. She said, I represent all Somalis and Somalia. My number one priority, she said, is Somalia, not the American people, as a congresswoman. This is by itself is called officially treason. It basically violates her oath as a congresswoman because she is supposed to be serving American people, and her number one and utmost and only priority is the United States of America, not any other country. Yet she said this openly. She had the audacity to say this, standing as a congresswoman from the U.S. from the Senate of state of Minnesota and Congress of the state of Minnesota, and she said these things. She also violated the USCIS procedures, United States Customs and Immigration Services. When she was before she became a naturalized American citizen, she was a green card holder. Over time, she became a naturalized American citizen, right? To be able to obtain the green card, what she did was she got married to her biological brother, her own biological brother. This has been basically swept under the rug, and it was all hush-hush by the Democrats during the Biden administration. It became obvious, and there was more and more and more talk about that. Eventually, they investigated on that one as well, and they proved that with everything, all kinds of analysis, investigation has been done, and they proved beyond any reasonable doubt that she cheated the immigration system to obtain green card under the current law, under the current immigration law that was passed under the Trump administration. If a naturalized citizen, like I am a naturalized citizen as well, if they find that I cheated the system, I lied, I fabricated things that were not there, if they find out, regardless of how long it has been, does not matter, they can strip that person's naturalized citizenship status, and then they can deport that person. This is the exact situation where Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is in, and it appears to be she will be in that process. She will be denaturalized. That's the official terminology. Denaturalized. Her U.S. naturalized citizenship status will be stripped off, and she will be deported back to Somalia. One more thing I want to tell you, folks. The same person, Ilhan Omar, the Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, you know what she said? I believe many people would remember this, and I believe there are also a sufficient amount of people they may not be aware of that. Do you know what she said about 9/11, about that tragic day, about that fateful day, about the day on September 11 of 2001, when the Twin Towers were attacked by those airplanes? She used these terms in quote. I'm using exactly the terminology, the words that she used. Again, in her official position, in the state Congress, she said, some people did something on September 11th. This was a direct slap on the face of every single American. But she could get away with that because under the Biden administration, all these things were hush-hush and covered and basically swept under the rug. No more. No more under Trump administration. No more. The treason, this kind of, fraudulent activities, brazen and huge in magnitude, once caught, the punishment should be severe enough to send a very strong message to anyone who is contemplating and planning on these things and thinking that they can do such things and get away in America. So this is what I wanted to share with you folks today. I'm actually very happy to hear the fact that they recently completed those investigations, the federal agencies, and finalized those investigations. And there was a very long, arduous, detailed financial investigation that has been completed along with the other parts of the investigation. And beyond any reasonable doubt that they prove each of those fraudulent activities was committed. And everybody who took part and participated by Somali people. It was Ilhan Omar's, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's constituency, city of Minneapolis. That's her main constituency, with close to 100,000 people. That's why she got elected as a congresswoman under the Biden administration. And she had the authority, she had the, I'm going to say, she had the, I want to say balls, she had the audacity to tell, look in the eye of the American people, saying that my priority is not the United States of America, but my priority is Somalia. Yes, sir, it's gotten to that point, to that level. And imagine all these things, and it's been going for years, not 1 or 2 years. Who is the governor of the state of Minnesota? Tim Walz. Governor Tim Walz. He'll be under very, very close scrutiny because it is a well-known thing. They also prove that this has been going on under his watch and he has been aware. I personally wish and hope to see that he got arrested for the crimes he committed, at the very least the negligence that he showed, to the level that is the destruction of the funds that was supposed to be there to serve the needs of the people in Minnesota who are in those needs. He is responsible. I hope he'll be found guilty for the crimes that he committed, and then he gets jail time. That's what I wish, honestly, for the governor of state of Minnesota, Tim Walz. And folks, you go back, remember, go back to the 2024 election. That guy who was masquerading then as the potential running mate of the U.S. presidency candidate Kamala Harris. Folks, imagine if people like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz was going to be vice president of this country, the same guy who's been basically, in my opinion, not only letting this go, but also facilitating. That's my personal opinion. I might be off, I might be wrong. And he was going to be vice president of the U.S. along with someone like Kamala Harris. I'm not gonna, I told you at the beginning of this recording, I'm not gonna make a political point about on this video, but I still brought some political dimensions. But I'm gonna stop here. I won't even make any comments about Kamala Harris. But those of you who understand, I believe I know you know. When I say, imagine Kamala Harris and Tim Walz duo in the highest office of this nation. The rest of it is, I just let you to figure out. Oh, anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time for watching this video. Stay safe. Take care.